What, when, where, why, and how. A lead story with George Davis. Weekdays at 6:30 p.m. on CVM TV.
Jamaica, make we do the right thing. Make we live good today for a better tomorrow. Talk it out. Don't fight it out. The time by the Ministry of National Security is
6:30.
Today on Lead Story here on CVM TV, I'll speak with the General Secretary of the People's National Party, Dr. Dayton Campbell, to talk about the latest poll findings which show that most Jamaicans believe the PNP is the party best suited to be leading Jamaica at this time. And I'll also have a word with the senior executives at the Jamaica Public Service Company talking about their Hurricane Beryl relief program, even as the Light and Power Company gets a battering for the delays in restoring power to those who were cut off during the passage of Hurricane Beryl. That's the agenda for the show this evening. Let's start the show. Welcome to Lead Story here on CVM TV on this Tuesday. So good to have you with us as usual. And I want to thank many of you who have told people about the program, encouraged them to watch. And we certainly work to give you a good show every evening. Today, politics and Beryl take the center stage. From the political perspective, we have to go to the latest findings of the Don Anderson poll. Don Anderson, of course, the chief at Market Research Services Limited, MRSL. They've published poll findings which show that the PNP is leading the JLP in terms of the question of which party do you intend to vote for, or would you vote for if an election were called? No, that was the question. And then to the point about the leaders and which leader is doing a good job, Mark Golding's favorability ratings higher than Andrew Holness's negative favorability ratings. And on the negative side, the Prime Minister's negative ratings higher than those of the opposition leader. We'll look at those numbers and then we'll have a discussion with the PNP General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell. So let's go to the ratings first. Well, let's look at the negative ratings. So what the latest Don Anderson polls are showing. Andrew Holness has a 37% negativity rating, Mark Golding at 26.2. Now, if I may explain what this means, people are ranking the opposition leader and the Prime Minister in terms of how they're doing their respective job. So among those who were asked to rate Andrew Holness doing the job of Prime Minister, 37% felt that he was not doing a good job. On the other hand, those who were asked to rate Mark Golding, his performance as opposition leader, 26.2% felt he was not doing a good job. So that's what the negative ratings indicate. Not a head-to-head as to who is better at this point in time. That was not the question. Negative rating, who is doing their job and how they're doing their job. That's essentially what this question is asking. Now, in terms of favorability, positive rating, 35.2% of those polled say that Mark Golding is doing a good job as opposition leader. 35.2%, while for the Prime Minister Andrew Holness, 33.8% say that he is doing a good job as Prime Minister. So where do the parties stand based on the latest poll? And we'll get the key demographics around the poll in terms of when the poll was conducted. And we know that these polls are usually done. The questions are asked of people who are registered to vote. Let's look at the party standings. The party standings before we go to Dr. Campbell. That is the clearest intention. Here we go. So 34.3% of those polled believe that, well, if the election were called now, the PNP would deserve and get their vote, as opposed to 27% for the JLP and 18.8% who say they don't know. That's effectively a 7 percentage point gap between the PNP and the JLP. It shows that the government is losing ground while the PNP, the wind appears to be in their back, and they are the momentum party at this time, if those poll numbers are to be your guide. We're being joined now by the PNP General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell. Good evening, Dr. Campbell.
Hi, good evening, and good evening to your listeners and viewers.
Thank you very much, sir. All right. So here we are. We have these numbers in front of us. What do they say about the work that has gone into, the very detailed and strategic work that has gone into building up Mr. Golding's favorability, how Jamaicans see him, and by extension, how Jamaicans view the party?
Well, this is the first time that Mark Golding has been polled as being more favorable than Andrew Holness. And he started at a low. I think he started in the teens, because Mark Golding is somebody that went into representational politics. He was voted in as an MP in 2017, and he became leader of the PNP in 2020. Just 3 years on the scene. It's not somebody that had positioned themselves before to become leader, so they weren't building any sort of profile that would have brought any form of notice to them from the populace. And so we had to develop a program strategically to take him to the people and for him to be exposed to them, for them to know who he is, what he's about, the qualities, the characteristics. And what we're seeing now is that there has been a steady increase in his numbers over the last 3.5 years, to the point where he's now polling ahead of the Prime Minister, who has been on a downward spiral over the last couple of years, coming from the high 40s now down to the low 30s. So what has happened is that there's been a crossing of the lines, one coming from low and going up, and one coming from high and heading down. We don't concern ourselves too much with what is going on in terms of the Prime Minister's favorability. Our job is to get our candidate out to the people, for them to know what he's about, know what he stands for, know what a future government with him as leader would be like. And I think so far we've been able to do a good job at that. There's still a lot of work to be done. So we're not resting on our laurels.
Yes.
But we pause to acknowledge the significant moment. A lot of persons thought that this wasn't possible.
Yes.
It took a lot of hard and strategic work. And so, we pause to acknowledge it, and then we continue to press along.
Yeah. So if we use September 2022 as a baseline, Dr. Campbell, the Blue Dot polls published in that month in 2022, just about 2 years ago, we can say, showed that Holness's favorability ratings, 45%. It said that Mark Golding's favorability ratings at that time, September 2022, was only 16%. If you contrast that with where you are today, what do you think is the key to Golding's movement in terms of being seen as a competent leader of the loyal opposition by the Jamaican people?
Well, I don't tend to compare different polls. Tend to use either you're sticking to this one over different.
The reason I used that one is because I couldn't find a similar Don Anderson one from September 2022. So I just had to use the baseline, given that all pollsters, they poll the same Jamaicans. Questions different, methodologies different, but just a broad application. We're not asking for a scientific answer here.
I get the general question that you're asking, but I was just making the point that I don't tend to compare polls.
That's fine.
But the general point in that what has happened over the last 3.5 years, as I said, is that Jamaicans have become more aware of who Mark Golding is. And to his credit, he has stuck to what has been a very rigid program. We've called on him, especially myself in the capacity as General Secretary, to undergo a very rigid program, and he has stuck to it without complaint. And even in the local government election a few months ago, I think the country realized that, well, he is up to the task. He's able to keep pace and to outpace the Prime Minister in his effort. And there are persons who I've heard say, well, it wasn't necessarily my cup of tea, but I have to give him credit for the effort that he's putting into it. And there are other persons, I've never seen Mark Golding go into a discussion, into a room, have a discussion with people, and come out with less support than he went in there with. He has always come out with more support. Whether it's locally or when we're on the diaspora tour, whenever he speaks, people get to understand the depth of his knowledge and the width of it. how wide he is able to speak on issues across different portfolios and his understanding of the issues. This is somebody who is probably the best legislator in the parliament. As Minister of Justice, I had over 100 pieces of legislation. If somebody right now, you can ask him to draft a bill for tomorrow,
yes,
and he would have something ready. And he has the background as a commercial lawyer, one of the top commercial lawyers in the country. So he understands the law and its interaction with the business sector. He's also a successful businessman. So he fits into the mold of politics quite well.
Yeah, let me ask you this. Let me ask you this, though. Let me ask you this, though. Don Anderson did a poll 2 months after the February 26 local government elections. The findings were published in April, poll commissioned by the PNP. And it showed that where favorability is concerned, Wholeness was standing at 40% and Golding at 37%. That poll had a margin of error of plus or minus 3%, and 18.1% had a negative view of Golding compared to 31.1% of Wholeness. So Wholeness 40% in April, significantly down from that at the snapshot of this poll, and Golding at 37% 2 months after the local government election, and now he's at what, 33%, so he would have lost 35. So he would have lost some ground in favorability. What happened? What do you think is at play there?
Margin of error is 3.
Margin of error is 3. So you can't,
37, 35 is the same thing.
Yes.
When the margin of error is 3, it is within the same ballpark, so it is not significant. Statistically, it's not significant.
Yes.
But also, coming out of the election in February, the people would have been in a more charged political environment. They wouldn't necessarily be in that same position in a poll that is conducted during the last week of June, because there's no election, there was no campaign, there was anything like that going on. So you could understand that also might have played a role. Our polling is to strategically guide us. I've said from day one that we're evidence-based, data-driven. We're going to be guided by the statistics. I'm a scientist, right? That's what I know. That's what I do. And that we're going to be guided by that and to shape our actions as to how we conduct what we're doing. Now, coming out of that poll to this one, the poll 2 months ago had Prime Minister at 40 and the current leader at 37 with a margin of around 3. So that was really a statistical dead heat. As it is now, 35, 33.
Well, the numbers suggest, the point is made in them, but the numbers suggest it could be 43 or 40, it could be 37 and 3, 40 or 37 minus 3, 34. It's still a statistical dead heat. But let me ask you this, in the time we have, what does this prove that the issue, the brouhaha over dual citizenship, which is still not settled because the renunciation has not been complete, does this prove that Jamaicans didn't care about that and they see Golding as something more than a dual citizen and that they don't see him in the way the JLP sought to paint him?
The JLP knew that didn't make any sense. In the current parliament, the JLP has a lot of members in there who are dual citizens with Commonwealth countries. If the JLP thought that it was really a point to separate themselves on, they would have made recommendations in the constitutional reform process to change it. They made no effort to make any changes to it, but then say that here's this thing that is legal, we're not trying to change it, but somehow you are immoral by doing it. Now, if you think the law is immoral, you have a duty to change it. So nobody bought into that. The party standing has proved that. The lead for the People's National Party, move away from just the leaders.
Yeah.
The lead for the People's National Party has been maintained at 7%, which is comfortable outside of the margin of error, which is 3%. So that 3 months of sustained attack on the leader did not assist the Jamaica Labour Party at all. He has subsequently taken a decision to renounce, to remove that issue off the table, right? And the issue of the Prime Minister being uncertified is not something that he can just get up and remove from the table.
Yes.
We're still awaiting that report on his declaration, and then we will see how that goes. But as far as we are concerned, where the party is concerned, where the leader is concerned, we think that we've been able to achieve our goals as to where we are along the timeline.
Yes.
And we have an next phase to go into to take us to the time of the election.
Hold it for us there.
We are checking the boxes along the way.
Hold it, Dr. Kim. I want to keep you for another 3 minutes if you have the time. So stay with us. After the break, we pick up the conversation. Talking to the PNP General Secretary, Dr. Dayton Campbell, the man who's effectively the CEO of the party. He says the numbers are not surprising. It's what they've expected, or they have been expecting, given the strategic work that has gone into improving Golding's standing with the Jamaican public, and by extension, lifting the party up from the doldrums that Golding took the party in. More on Lead Story after these.
.45.
What's your story? What's your sign? We're dreamers. Don't care what other people say. We're doing this in our own way. We come alive. We come alive. We come alive. We're doing this in our own
The time by Grace. Taste that moves you is
6:45.
The man Sean Corey Carter, you know him as Jay-Z, he rapped once that men lie, women lie, numbers don't. And the PNP is saying this evening that the numbers don't lie about the standing of their leader in the eyes of the Jamaican public. Neither do the numbers lie about where the party stands relative to the JLP at this time. The latest Don Arnes polls showing that if an election were to be called now, it is the PNP that most of those eligible to vote would support at the polls, and that Golding's favorability ratings are higher than the favorability ratings for the Prime Minister, while conversely his negativity ratings are lower than that of Andrew Michael Holness. Dr. Dayton Campbell, the PNP General Secretary, is with me. Dr. Campbell, the announcement by Mr. Golding that he would be taking steps to renounce his British citizenship, was that motivated in part by the findings of a poll?
Well, as I said before, here we have a situation where a matter is allowed under the constitution of the country. Just a little bit of quick history. It has always been allowed. We got universal adult suffrage in 1944, and since that time we've had criteria as to how do you run, what eligibility criteria for you to become a member of the parliament. Between that time and 1962, it was termed that you had to be a British subject. And then that was changed to say that you have to be a part of the British Commonwealth. And this is based, obviously, on our history. So even when Mr. Siaga renounced, he didn't renounce because it was a moral decision. He renounced because he wasn't a British subject. So that is the reason for his renunciation. So a lot of persons have gotten that confused because they operate as if Jamaica started in 1962. It did not. Now, that matter under the Constitution, we're currently going through a process of constitutional reform. Nobody has put it forward to say that this should not be allowed. The only recommendation, to be frank, has come from the leader of the PNP, who has said, as opposed to being a member of the British Commonwealth, you should allow persons who are members of the Jamaican Commonwealth to become a member of parliament. Because currently you could come from Australia, live in Jamaica for a year without Jamaican citizenship and run. That is currently legal and constitutional. And the leader said, no, the person should be Jamaican, regardless of where else they are. Well, that's a debate for another time. So, for some strange reason, the Jamaica Labour Party seem to now latch on to this matter and for 3 months berated the leader of the party. So you have something that is constitutional, you have your opponents who are not making any changes to the constitution about it, but you're still talking about it, so you don't want to see. Where do we go from there? We poll on a quarterly basis, roughly. I mean, we've been releasing these polls to the public, so this is not new. We poll on a quarterly basis. We are data-driven. right? We are a data-driven party. As I said, I'm a scientist. That's what I know, right? I'm not going to just be guided by subjective views. We're talking about the objective views here that we can measure, right? And so we check things. We do polls to strategically guide us. I'm not going to review all of the questions that we ask in the polls. We ask questions about various matters that are currently topical in the country, about things people would want to see us doing and those other things. So you ask questions so you can guide your operations. We thought that this dual citizenship argument was a distraction. And we thought that it was best for us to remove it from the table so that the Labour Party now will be forced to go and talk about the issues that are actually afflicting the people of the country. Crime and violence, unemployment.
But hold on, Dr. Campbell. Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
Dr. Campbell.
Yes.
I've given you a long run. You said that you're a man of science, you're a man of numbers,
Yes.
you are a man of process, and those things you are. As a journalist, my talent is in the area of perspicacity. So I'm going to take from what you said that yes, you did poll the question of Mark Golding's renunciation of his British citizenship.
No, what I'm saying to you is that our decision as to whether or not he should renounce was based on the fact that we wanted to remove what we thought was a nuisance. It's like a mosquito singing by your ear.
But it's funny you said that. It's funny you say that. It's funny you say that you don't leave important things one way or the other to whims and fancies or feelings. You say you go to the numbers. Then it would be surprising then that you chose consciously not to poll this question.
No, man,
Especially
I didn't answer, you know.
Yes.
No, I didn't answer.
And that's the point I'm making. I want you to answer, and I don't know why you're not. You've answered every question I've asked so far, clearly. But you're not answering this one. I find that strange.
No.
Give me an answer, please, sir. On behalf of the people watching us,
I didn't answer it.
Dr. Campbell, on behalf of those watching us and who have enjoyed your conversation so far, give them an answer. Did you poll that question?
They will continue to enjoy. I'm not answering that because that's not the discussion I'm having this evening.
No.
I could have that discussion another evening because I know there is going to be a follow-up question from that.
You've been
around long enough
you see,
to know that there's going to be a
I'm not trying to Dr. Campbell, hold on, no. Dr. Campbell, I'm not trying to outflank you as a data scientist or a scientist by training, otherwise in medicine. What I'm trying to do is to, on behalf of those who aren't in my position to be speaking to you directly on this issue, to ask you squarely, if you have polled that question, then if you anticipate a follow-up question, you have the right of refusal to say, boy, George, I'm not answering that. But I want you to answer this question. Did you poll the question of whether Mark Jefferson Golding should renounce his UK citizenship?
No, that's not how we poll our question. We asked a question about...
Did you ask a derivative question, Dr. Campbell?
I won't tell you exactly what the question was.
No, I'm not asking for the question. I don't want to know what the question was.
Right.
Did you pose a question in that regard?
Yes. We did ask about the topic. We also asked about about your declaration of your income, assets, and liabilities.
Yes.
You would be surprised. That will come at a later date.
Yes.
But you will be surprised of the overwhelming majority that agrees with the leader of the PNP that somebody that is not certified should be disqualified from running.
Yes.
So we did ask a variety of questions.
Yes.
We did, right? And as I said, our questions are generally to guide us how we operate,
yes,
right? And we are always seeking to get from the people so that our positions that we take, not that we are vacillating around our positions,
yes,
but that our positions also find favor with the people because they are trying to resolve issues that they have.
Along with vacillation, which is an injury on discourse, another injury is prevarication. And I don't know if the public will say, well, why on this point Dr. Campbell appears to be prevaricating? But hold on, let me ask you this one. Hold on.
Consultation that leads to consensus. So this is a part of the democratic process.
Let me ask you this one.
We're not an aristocratic party.
Yes.
Right? We're not a dictatorship.
Yes.
So our model has always been to consult with the people.
Yes.
So consulting with the people is within our wheelhouse. It is what we do.
Yes. Let me ask you this. In your we know how very close you are to the opposition leader. He stood by you during tough times. We all know that you found yourself in a tough spot. He stood by you publicly when many people, including within your own party, were saying dispense and find a new CEO of the PNP. He stuck with you because he believed you, and you were vindicated in the end by the avenue of justice. But let me ask you this. Have you spoken to him and said to him, perhaps it is that you should not have made that remark about 1 foot in, 1 foot out of the King's Yard to prompt the JLP to go after you where the issue of dual citizenship is concerned, despite your other citizenship being of a Commonwealth nation? Did you have that conversation with him? Was he remorseful about that remark?
I did not have that conversation with him, and that is not when that attack started. You have to remember.
No, I'm not talking about where it started. I'm talking where it got legs. I'm not talking about where it started, Dr. Campbell. I'm not talking about where it started. I'm talking about where it really got legs, because we all know where it started. I'm talking about where it got legs. That remark.
Based on his favorability and the party standing on other things, you know, it didn't actually get legs.
Yes. Oh, okay. Okay.
It was actually a smokescreen.
Yes.
Right? So it was something that persons were trying to do. It's what they call much ado about nothing.
Yes.
Right? So it never really got legs.
Yes.
And I did not have that conversation with him because people have to remember, Mark Golding is a lawyer, right? I have legal training as well. We don't take decisions that are illegal. We don't.
Yes.
So people have to always understand that what was being said. Here's what the JLP was saying, that when we said that though the standing orders allow it, we think that it is a possibility, there's a possibility of a conflict of interest if you put the Prime Minister's wife. They said, no, you can't say that because the rules allow it.
Yes.
The same party then comes back on the other side of their mouth to say that, yes, this is in the Constitution. We're reviewing it and we're not trying to change it, so we think it should stay in there. But yet still, you shouldn't do it.
Let me ask you this. Were the results of the question of Mr. Golding's decision to renounce, were the poll findings close in terms of whether he should or should not?
No, that I am not going to answer, but the point about him renouncing is something that we discussed from before.
Yes.
And the view was that this is a distraction.
Yes.
Persons are talking about it, regardless of what the outcome of the poll has said.
Yes.
Don't allow persons to be distracting the country with this non-issue when we have the real issues to talk about.
Yes. At the current rate of trajectory, Dr. Campbell, by say, I don't know if you anticipate an election by the end of the year. You're the numbers man. You're doing this analysis. But let me ask you that question. Do you anticipate an election this year, a general election?
I think there is a possibility. I think the government is looking for a window. I think whenever they see a window, they will jump. I don't think they're not going to see a window.